Good morning. Welcome to Simply Limitless on this cloudy and wet, damp day. I'm Paul Raper. I'm in charge of the centre which operates in the Wyre Forest District. We're part of the delivering of the Reconnection service into the Wyre Forest District. My role is just to help you be safe today. Safety comes from looking at signs, because you could get lost. The guides will show you around, as Jeanette will tell you later on. But the main thing is look at where the fire exit signs are pointing, and if there is a fire, move quickly in the right direction. The other thing, there are toilets situated. They're all on the ground floor. In here, the toilets are through the purple doors at the back. There are toilets as you go to the left and to the right. Before you go up the stairs, you'll see as you go around, and that's some more. And further on towards the cafe, if you need to stop off there on the way, there are more toilets there. So please have a wonderful morning, and I hope you gain an awful lot from this Reconnections Open Day, which is the first of its kind. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Ben Jupp. I'm help lead our work on health and social care at Social Finance. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and we're one of the partners in Reconnections. As you'll see from the slides, one of the great things about Reconnections is that it's brought together a whole range of different partners, from very local embedded community organisations to organisations with national oversight around the importance of addressing loneliness and isolation. And one of the purposes of this day is actually for many of us who've been involved in Reconnections in different ways to learn from each other and share. And I'm looking forward to as much from visiting different parts of the service and getting a sense of how things are going on the ground as you will be. But I have the privilege of being one of the people who was involved towards the start of the process of setting up Reconnections. And over the next 10 minutes or so, I thought I would help set the scene a little bit by giving a brief overview of why addressing and responding to loneliness and isolation was a really important priority locally. And then a little bit around how an interesting way of funding services and a focus on outcomes was instrumental to getting the service established. Then I'll hand over to Sophie, who's actually been much more important in terms of energising and developing and managing the service than I have been. And then Jeanette will kind of do the speed dating approach of getting it into groups and organising how we're going to move around during the day to learn from different components of the service before we come back again to have a final kind of questions, answers, reflections and sharing session at the end. So just to start a little bit, why focus on loneliness? And again, I think there are many of you in the room, both locally and nationally, who have been looking and realising the importance of addressing loneliness for a long time. I think of Janet Morrison there, who was a founder of the campaign to end loneliness probably 5 or 6 years ago now. Actually, the first time it really struck home to me the importance of addressing loneliness and isolation was reading a book about 20 years ago about a heat wave in Chicago, and how it was really those older people who didn't have any social connections but succumbed to the heat wave. And you could see this in certain neighbourhoods which were very fragmented and isolated, whereas people who were part of wider networks in the kind of Latino community, for example, almost nobody died on that heat wave. And I think my sense is that over the last 10, 15 years, due to people such as the Campaign to End Loneliness nationally and locally, organisations have managed to start to raise the importance of loneliness, not just as a well-being issue, but also an important part of our social fabric, but also as a factor which makes an enormous difference on people's health and their use of health services. Someone get a glass of water, I'm just finding it's a bit dry in here. And I think that this is an area which is still emerging in terms of our understanding. And it is not nearly as easy to explain the relationship between loneliness and people's health, as is, for example, to explain the relationship between smoking and people's health. For smoking, we understand that if you smoke and you have carcinogens in your lungs, you're more likely to have lung cancer and you're more likely to have ill health. That's very straightforward. I think that intuitively, we all know that our social relationships are incredibly important to our well-being. It doesn't fit quite so easily into a kind of medical model of understanding how determinants of health work. But over the last 15 years, we've seen a growing weight of evidence that actually being chronically lonely is as bad for your health as being a very frequent smoker. And we've also seen emerging evidence that understandably people who are lonely are therefore more likely to use health and social care services, both because they don't have the immediate support networks around them, and also because they're more likely to develop a range of conditions: depression, lack of exercise leading to other conditions, dementia, and a whole other aspects of well-being which maybe not completely understood, but we see in terms of people's overall health and their use of services. Our route for starting to work with others on this in Worcestershire actually came not from that scientific evidence and working downwards. It really came from working initially with the council and the CCGs to support them to look at what a more community-focused and preventative health and social care system could look like in the round. Part of the integrated care programme or the well-connected programme for those who are involved in it across the county. And what's very interesting for me is that when we started doing this work, the assumption is that we would be working with those people who were just revolving in and out of hospital all the time, and that was the greatest need. But as we started to talk to older people themselves and to community organisations who worked with them, what was emerging was that as big a need was a more preventative and supportive approach to care. And it was from that kind of more bottom-up impetus that we started to link up with some of the evidence about the importance of loneliness on people's health and well-being and use of services. And just to put that into perspective, in Worcestershire, we consider looking at the surveys and things like that, but there's probably at least 11,000 older people who are chronically lonely. Some surveys would put that up to 35,000, 30% or so of all older people in Worcestershire. And so this isn't a small issue, as many of you be aware. This is an issue which pervades across many sections of societies, rural and urban areas, and is one which has been characterised by a lot of really good local work, but probably not being on the radar and on the agenda of the health service in quite the same way as, for example, smoking cessation or addressing alcohol. And so the origins of Reconnections was in the combination of that bottom-up work with older people and the voluntary and community sector, married with the emerging evidence that I talked about at the start, and the fact that over 10 years or so, we estimated that the excess use of the additional use of health and social care services might cost up to £12,000 more for somebody who was chronically lonely. And that leads into the second question, which is, how do we start to develop services which are addressing new issues and at some scale, rather than just being a tiny pilot? How as a society and how as a set of local government, the NHS and other parties, do we start to put in place responses which are comparable to the needs that we see? And one way in social finance that we have been involved in this is by looking at whether the relationship between providers of services and commissioners of services and organisations that would want to put funding into services could evolve to enable services to develop at greater scale. We've described this often as a social impact bond, which sounds like some sort of financial instrument you might get from your independent financial advisor or something like that, and actually is a little bit of a misnomer. I'm told by colleagues who are around at the start of this that the term bond is actually the relationship, that the term, my word is my bond. It's a trust. It's an agreement between people. In this instance, it's an agreement between public service commissioners in the local authorities, socially motivated investors, and voluntary and community sector providers of organisations of services to respond to a social need in a different and in a bigger way. And I know you can kind of look at me and look at the slide. It's a little bit difficult. Maybe you do need to look a little bit at the slide in this one. What we found, if we look at loneliness, for example, is this evidence that if fewer people are lonely, their health is likely to increase, and they're less likely to make use of health and social care services. But we also know that there's risks for local government and the NHS in very cash-strapped times of just going and spending a lot of money on new services without necessarily knowing what they're going to achieve. And so in this instance, we developed a partnership which was based on an agreement that if outcomes are improved for people, only then will the local government and the NHS need to make payments. So it's sort of transferring some of the risk to the social investors, and then taking a decision that they will fund services up front on the basis of that if they're successful, if loneliness is reduced, only then will commissioners make payments. And I think that in a time of very stretched budget, that's also very helpful for commissioners to justify the value for money they're getting from a service. And so that's the first part of this relationship of trust that needs to develop between commissioners and social investors. The second part, as I said, is social investors, in this instance, an innovation charity called Nesta, Age UK National, and the Care and Wellbeing Fund, which is a fund supported by Macmillan Cancer Support and Big Society Capital, have all put in around £600,000 to £800,000. They've collectively put in about £600,000 to £800,000 to kick off the service, working with Age UK, Hereford and Worcestershire, and a variety of partners who you'll meet today, including Simply Limitless. And I have to say, those partners have also put in an enormous amount of their own time, effort, money and support in developing the service. That is enabling Reconnections to develop. It is providing the funding for the volunteer support, the other elements you'll hear about. And as I mentioned, as we start to have an impact on reducing the loneliness of people who've used the service, then funding is released by the county council and the local NHS. I think I'll just leave one final thought on this, which, Two final thoughts to say on this. Firstly, I often talked about this as a research social impact bond. In many ways, this is a pilot, and is a large pilot, but understanding and sharing learning is as much a feature of what we're trying to achieve as it is in the specific service. If we come in and said we've got all this right to start off with, we probably weren't testing things enough. This is the first time that we've had a service which has had to really robustly evidence the impact on reducing loneliness as a basis for a contract. It's the first time I know that social investors have worked with such a range of medium-sized and small voluntary and community sector organisations. And it's interesting because although there's lots of people who've been developing promising approaches to developing loneliness, I don't think any of us would say that we have got the perfect response to loneliness for different groups yet. And therefore, it's needing to be innovating, developing, and reflecting on that as we've gone along, rather than implementing a service which we absolutely know has worked elsewhere. That's all made it an exciting project. We sought to support 3,000 people at the start to reduce loneliness by 1 point using from a relatively standard 12-point measure. And as I said before, to learn the lessons of that and share them with others, of which today is an important part of. So I really hope you enjoy your day. We're going to have Sophie leading you for a little bit more of a service now. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sophie Price. I'm Reconnections Manager at Age UK, Herefordshire and Worcestershire. And I'm going to tell you about the Reconnections service, about who is involved, the client journey, and a snippet of what we've been doing and what we've achieved over the last couple of years. I'm going to start, however, by showing you a video clip, so I hope you're all going to be able to see the screen. We use a number of different video clips in our Reconnections training. Some of them are sort of national ones that have been on the news, and some of them are ones from our own clients and our own volunteers. Interestingly though, if I'd seen yesterday on Facebook, Independent Age had a fantastic video focusing on men, because obviously the Joe Cox Commission is focusing on men and loneliness this month, and if I'd seen that earlier I might have stolen it, but I would have had to ask Janet here, the CEO of Independent Age, I might have had to ask her permission first, but that's a great one. So this one is a video clip of two lonely older people taken from Channel 4 News last year, and I hope it works.
If you've never been lonely, you don't realise what it is like.
It feels as though you've been dumped in the deep end and there's nobody there to rescue you.
Well, you go hours and hours, never speak to anybody.
I don't think you'll ever get used to it. You know, it's always loneliness.
How do you measure loneliness when even trying to talk about it takes your breath away?
The room's just empty.
"91-year-old Margaret Nicholas has lived in this house virtually her whole life, first with her parents, then her husband and family. 2 years ago her husband died, now it's just her.
We used to do the garden together, do our shopping together, everything was done together.
But you obviously miss him."
I do.
Margaret's granddaughter takes her shopping and neighbours pop in to check she's okay, but it's everyday company she misses.
You know, some people would think me a bit odd, but I just chat to my husband. I do it so I'm sort of, speaking.
That's the wife with a cousin.
Roy Croucher lives a short drive away. He and Margaret have loneliness in common. He lost his only son to cancer, and then his wife for 50 years.
I'm always hoping that the wife will come through the door, which she never will. if you go out, you come back to an empty house, you know, and it's loneliness again. And you're always waiting for somebody to call.
Roy says he's lucky. A friend and her family see him most weeks. But like Margaret, some days the only voice he'll hear is a call from a phone befriending service run by volunteers.
Julie rings up on a Saturday night, because last Saturday she was the first person I spoke to all day.
And that's a long day.
It is a long day.
And how much difference has that made, that phone call that comes on Saturday night when you haven't spoken to anyone else all day?
Well, I always look forward to it. I always put that phone on that seat, ready to pick it up. And that's a great help.
The campaign to end loneliness says it should now be treated as a public health issue. Identifying the most vulnerable is critical, then offering support to cope with the bewildering and painful reality of ending up alone.
I've never been on my own ever before. Yeah.
And so getting used to that has been hard.
It has. I don't think I'll ever get really used to it.
It's just something that is thrown at you. You know, you can't throw it back to anybody. You know, you've got to just carry on.
So yeah, obviously we use that video with our training, and it gets me every single time I see it, and we do draw people to tears when we show that one. Now, as we heard, Roy has a telephone befriender who phones him every Saturday night, and he makes sure that that phone is ready on the chair for that very important call. Now, with Reconnections, we wanted to build on that model and reconnect people with others in their community to widen their social networks and create more independence. Now, some clients are housebound and can't go out. Others want to attend activities but need some encouragement or someone to accompany them. And others want to attend activities but may have lost confidence or run out of ideas. So we look at clients' needs in a holistic way, and by matching them with a volunteer, we aim to build people's self-esteem so that, where possible, after they've been supported for 6 to 9 months, we will have built their confidence in order that they can re-engage with their communities and opportunities nearby. So it's important to note that we can provide a service for anyone over the age of 50. And yes, we do have some clients in their 50s, you might be surprised to hear. But at the other end of the scale, we recently had our first referral of a lady who was 100 years old. And we also recently had a referral for a 94-year-old lady who still rides a bicycle, which I thought was quite incredible. She actually fell off that recently, but we won't go into that. So as you can see from this slide here, Reconnections is a partnership of local organisations who work across the county providing this free service. It's a network of delivery partners. Each delivery partner covers a different geographical area of the county and supports clients by matching them with volunteers who live in their area. Person-centred plans are created which builds on their strengths and help to support them with any barriers they may face. And this may include psychological interventions, or it could be hands-on practical support. But the aim is to link clients with people, places and activities in their area so that they can feel less lonely. So, for example, if a client lives in Worcester, then Worcester Community Trust will visit them and assess their needs and assign them to a volunteer. If a client lives in Droitwich, then Age UK, Herefordshire and Worcestershire will visit them and assign one of their volunteers, and so on. You will, of course, have the chance to talk to all of the delivery partners about what they do during the speed networking a bit later on. So our central team and our delivery partners obviously know their patches very well. They research what activities are out there. They and their volunteers will contact those organisations and work with a client. Now, this could be helping a client to perhaps access a local virtual history group on Facebook, or it could be helping them attend a walking group. But often, a lot of the support involves building confidence and encouraging clients to take positive steps. I don't know if you can all see this slide, but I just wanted to show this slide to give a bit of a flavour of some of the events and activities that we've organised and attended. It's not very easy to see, is it? But I'll just run through it. So we're not an activity partner as such, but we do help our partners set up activities where there is a need. For example, trips out for evening bowling sessions, followed by a nice meal, riverside walks and coffee mornings. And some of our delivery team, along with clients and volunteers, recently took part in a flash mob in Malvern. So if you can see that picture there of Sally with her arms raised like this, we all learned a couple of dances and took part in a flash mob, which was really good fun. The picture in the middle, again, you might not be able to see it very well, but it's a picture of our outdoor lounge that we held in Kidderminster last summer. We've arranged outdoor lounges across the county at various venues over the last 12 months. And what we do is we set up a living room with tables, chairs, sofas, tea and coffee in a high street, and we'll invite shoppers to take a seat and have a cup of tea and a chat to us. And in that case, on that slide, there was also a chance to take part in Mega Movers, which is armchair aerobics, and that's actually going to take place in here at lunchtime today, so I hope you'll all have a little bit of a go after your lunch. So outdoor lounges, again, are a great way of also recruiting new volunteers. There's another picture at the bottom there of us being interviewed by BBC Midlands Today. Now, they came and interviewed clients and volunteers here in Kidderminster back in December. The news report went out on television and drummed up a great deal of interest from clients and volunteers. And in fact, we're still getting people coming forward now as a result of seeing that news report last December, which is fantastic. And finally, there's a picture at the bottom there of a mock-up lounge, which we use when we train our volunteers. You might not be able to see it, but they're actually wearing masks, such as Camilla, the client, and William, the volunteer. We have masks of the royal family, and we pretend that we're a client and a volunteer. It just makes it easy and fun and engaging for the volunteers. We've actually set up an area over there, actually, which you'll see as you come around the speed networking. It's a little mock-up lounge there that we have. And we do things like we set up piles of post, we set up trip hazards with a wire trailing across the floor, family photos, a nurse's watch. These are all there to help volunteers think about any hazards, any safeguarding issues, but also to help with conversation starters. For example, oh, I see that watch there, did you used to work as a nurse? So anything to get the conversation going. So together with our partners, volunteers and clients, we arrange and attend many different events across the county to promote the service as far and wide as we can, and this also ensures that we're all working together as one big team. So again, it's important to tell you about a client's journey through Reconnections. Loneliness is measured by the 4-question UCLA scale, and we ask those questions at referral, again at 6 to 9 months, and again at 18 months. And our triage team, who are here today, can give you more information on this when you visit the central team later. Referrals can be made to our service through friends, family, neighbours, professionals, or by the clients themselves. And our triage team at AGKH&W then makes the first contact with the client and talks them through what support they need and to score them for eligibility. A client will then receive a visit from one of the delivery partners who will assess their needs in more detail and help them to create a plan which will be regularly reviewed. The client will be matched to a volunteer who will then support that client for 6 to 9 months. And it may be that interaction starts with a phone call or visits. This may progress to meeting at a new venue or with other people. But the aim is to promote independence, where the client can widen their social networks. Sometimes this journey extends to clients themselves becoming volunteers for Reconnections, and I know a few of those are here today, so hopefully you'll get the chance to talk to some of those. So if I can just give you an example case study, if you can imagine this lady on the slide there is Mrs. Smith. So Mrs. Smith is a 75-year-old widow living in her family home in Worcester. When her husband passed away 2 years ago, her world started to narrow. Social isolation has been accompanied by decreasing mobility and a growing sense of loneliness. And in this case, Mrs. Smith's GP noticed that her mood has been low for some months, so he completes a referral to the Reconnections service. Mrs. Smith is contacted by Reconnections to explain the programme, complete a short questionnaire, check for eligibility and arrange a visit. Mrs. Smith is then visited by the delivery partner and through a guided conversation identifies some of the causes of loneliness and ways in which she would like to connect with others. Mrs. Smith attends a community singing group with support of volunteer encouragement, transportation and check-ins for feedback on her plan. And when she's nervous about first steps, they support her with simple mindfulness strategies. Mrs. Smith attends that singing group for 3 to 6 months, but when she misses a session, the volunteer calls to offer her support. She's also linked up with others from the programme who start to meet socially. She's then phoned for her 6-month survey at 6 months. So following this, Mrs. Smith meets a couple of new friends for coffee on a weekly basis, and there is someone she can phone. In the community centre, she starts an exercise class and is happy to help another woman put in touch with her through the service. And Mrs. Smith might then go on to volunteer. So that's just an example of a client journey with Reconnections. Again, you're not going to be able to see those stats on there, but we can run you through them later. But this is a slide about our volunteers. As you all know, working in the voluntary sector, it's not easy to keep the level of volunteers, the number of volunteers that you need, the retention. But we're doing really, really well with volunteer recruitment at the moment. Last year, we decided to make use of social media with regards to attracting volunteers. And through a simple online route, we've not only increased the number of volunteers, but have seen some interesting changes in trends. Now here, we analysed the first 50 online applications received this year, and the results show the age range was between 35 and 54, which is amazing. So with this younger age range, brings the advantage of people who perhaps have more access to a car, and due to some who work in the day, can spare more time at evenings and weekends, which is often the most lonely time for clients. And many are also happy to help out at events. And again, we have a number of those volunteers here today. So I know they're not all in the room, but thanks so much to them all for coming, for helping out on this day. And also to those who've worked tirelessly over the weekend to ensure that Simply Limitless is even more spick and span than it normally is. Okay, so I'm just going to end with some stats for you. So far we've had over 1,200 referrals to Reconnections, and we're helping around 240 clients at any one time. Our current average reduction in loneliness is minus 1.24, and some months have seen a reduction in minus 2.4 points, which is fantastic. So as Ben said earlier, we thought the average reduction would be 0.78, so we're doing really well on that front. We undertake workshops and events to share our learning on a regular basis, such as working with National Age UK and some of the Age UKs up in the north of the country, who are all working on projects to reduce loneliness. And welcome to those who are here today. So this was a very quick tour of the operational side of Reconnections, but hopefully we can go into more detail with you during the speed networking sessions. And on that note, I'll hand over to Jeanette. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm just going to explain to you how the speed networking works, because you may not admit that you've done speed dating, but anyone that's done it, that's kind of how it works. So what we're going to do is you've got hosts around the room. Can the host stand up, please? Thank you. We're all in our jazzy t-shirts. For those of you that didn't see, those that aren't in t-shirts just sat down. So it's just the group hosts that I want standing up. We will be taking you round the speed networking today. And you will have 15 minutes in with each room. And in the rooms, we will have a conversation around commissioning. So Ben will be in one of those rooms, along with some of the other room hosts. And they'll be talking about how the service was commissioned. These aren't presentations as such. These are opportunities for you to ask questions and to hear a little bit about how things were set up, and then ask questions about what you want to know. So we've got one room that's commissioning. We've got another room talking about the data. And you will have a chance to see how we use data, what we learn from it, and what we share with our delivery partners. You'll also have the opportunity to talk to clients and volunteers and meet with them, and also the Age UK Central team. I don't know if I've missed anyone. And delivery partners, a whole room of delivery partners, so you can find out what each of those different providers do. So each of the hosts will be colour-coded, and on your badge, you will all have a colour. Has everyone got a badge? Anyone not got a coloured sticker that's fallen off? Okay, if you haven't, just go and ask somebody and we'll give you a sticker with a badge. So in terms of rooms, we have anybody that's light blue will be going with Lynn at the back. Lynn, can you just wave? Lynn, blonde lady at the back waving, is light blue. Dark blue will be Charlie. Charlie waving from the back. Matt, where's Matt? Matt's at the back, our sound man. Matt is yellow. Anybody that's got a yellow sticker will be following Matt today. Tavonga is red. There's also, just to confuse you, red with a cross. So be really careful which one you've got. Red with a cross will be going with Tim. Tim's waving down the front here. Red on its own goes with Tavonga. And I'm green. So if anybody's green, they'll be following me. And the way it works is you will follow your group host. We will take you to your first room. You will have 15 minutes to absorb all of the information in the room or ask any questions. You will then be moved. And you have to move when they move you, because an alarm will go off and they will move you to your next room. That's really important, because otherwise lots of other people will be bumping in behind you. We are all moving in a clockwise direction around the building, so it's really important that you follow your host. There's one trip hazard to point out today because it is rainy weather. When you're walking across the decking, it's really important you walk in single file and you just walk on the little sticky pad bits because the decking is very, very slippery otherwise. Okay? Does everyone know what you're going to be doing? At 12 o'clock, your room host will bring you back here for lunch. We're also going to be able to watch the Mega Movers demonstration, and if anyone wants to join in with armchair aerobics to work off their lunch, then that's fine. So if you go and find your correctly coloured host. Cool. Right, what am I? You've got 6 minutes.